How are you?
Om Shanti brother, fine. What about you?
Yeah, I'm very fine and excited to see the uh, second chapter of Holy Quran, which is Al-Baqarah. So we are going to see from the verse 132. Um, yes, sister, read 132 verse.
And Abraham exhorted his sons and Jacob, O my sons, God has chosen this religion for you. So do not die unless you have submitted.
Mm, Actually, people might wonder that he is mentioning specific religion, but it is the religion of submission. That's the religion. So that's what we discussed in detail in yesterday's video. Because God, in the end of the world, which is now the last 100 years, He comes from His supreme abode. He is called Allah by Muslims, Heavenly Godfather by Christians, and Shiv by Hindus. He himself comes, he enters an old man's body because he doesn't take birth like us. He enters an old man's body and he names him Brahma. So that Brahma was represented as Abraham in not Abraham, Adam in Bible and Quran, the first man. He is not the first man, but he is the first man who receives God's knowledge because it is only through his body God speaks. So and makes the people who were body conscious till then. So body consciousness was compared to clay. So they God brings them back to soul consciousness. That is, we need to consider ourselves to be soul that shines like a tiny star in between the eyebrows, which is why Hindus apply a tilak right here. So God says, now renounce everything. Just consider yourself to be soul and nothing belongs to you. Surrender everything that belongs to you to God the Father. So that is total submission. That's the religion. Actually, they have mentioned it as religion, but that's what God teaches. Full submission to God. No matter what happens to anybody around me, to people of my religion, to people of my language, to people of my country, to people of my family, it shouldn't
Mm.
bother me. If it bothers me, it means I consider them to be mine. So that's the reason God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. So that's because
So that's
you
because
shouldn't have
you
any
shouldn't have
attachment
any
to anybody.
attachment to it.
So you shouldn't have attachment to anything or anybody, which is what God teaches. For that, we need to consider God as a point of light, and we need to establish all relationships with just one God. So through that, we will develop soul consciousness. Uh, so God teaches us to submit ourselves, to surrender ourselves, uh, to attach to only one God, not to anybody else. Because everybody and the everything that we see through our physical eyes is going to get destroyed. Because God comes just 100 years before the destruction to save us from the pain one undergoes on seeing their loved ones getting killed right in front of their eyes. That's why God asks us not to see anybody while seeing, not to listen to anybody while listening. Just listen to one God who speaks through Brahma Kumaris. So that's available now. So only to him we have to listen. And if anything that goes in this society that aligns with God's knowledge, we can say yes. If it doesn't, then we shouldn't say yes. We should tactically come out of it. So whatever God says, we should only follow that. And what does God say? Just to consider ourselves to be soul and to remember God as a point of light as much as possible. So when you continuously be in remembrance of God, what happens is we do not get distracted to the external surroundings. Instead, our focus will be in the soul. So that's when we start to realize blissfulness and peacefulness from within. We don't have to depend on them outside, because that's how we were when we were in heaven for the first 2500 years, because we were soul conscious, and God makes us to become soul conscious again. But we were body conscious for the past 2500 years, because of which we got addicted to sensual pleasures, lust, greed, anger, attachment, and ego. So these are the root causes of all pain and suffering. So to escape that, we have to renounce those vices. For that, we have to renounce the body consciousness and consider yourself dead to this world. We consider yourself that you are out of this body, just as a soul. See each other as a soul while interacting. That's when you will express your true nature of the soul, which is um, happiness, peacefulness, love, and purity. So that's the true nature of every soul. So as long as we are seeing only the soul, we will only express these divine qualities. It is when we become body conscious and start looking at body that we develop lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego. So that's the religion she was speaking about. Abraham makes his son and Jacob to follow this chosen religion that's created directly by God, not by religious preachers, religious founders. So don't die without submitting yourself fully to God. In other words, you can say die in remembrance of only God. Because if you consider anything to be yours, obviously that will come in your thoughts at the time of death. So that's why he has said, before dying, make sure you have surrendered yourself completely to God, so that only remembrance of God and remembrance of heaven should be in your mind. Because after the destruction of the world is going to become heaven. So that's the thing he is saying. And uh, read the next verse, sister, 133.
Or we are witnesses when death approached Jacob, and he said to his sons, "What will you worship after me?" They said, "We will worship your God and the God of your fathers Abraham, Ishmael, and Isaac, one God, and to him we submit."
Yes, we need to understand. Now, they constantly speak about one God. So, when will we speak about one God? We are speaking about one God. We are saying God has come, He is just one, follow His instructions. So, it obviously means they are saying this at the time of multiple God and multiple paths created by humans, many religions. So, you have to give up those and hold on to only God and His path. So, and another thing is, in heaven, after reaching heaven, there's no need to worship God. We don't even remember God for the first 2500 years, because it will be filled only with happiness, no trace of sorrow. So, only if we suffer, we will remember God. So, that's the reason for the first 2500 years, we will not remember God at all. But once you become body conscious and fall into lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego, then we will start experiencing punishment for that. Only then we will remember God and start worshipping the one God. The first God for whom the temple was built was God Shiva. That God Shiva is called Allah by Muslims, Heavenly Godfather by Christians. God is just one. This happens in India because India was heaven. So even here, in the beginning, they pray only Shiva, nobody else. They don't pray deities. Now Hindus worship deities, the residents of heaven. They were not gods, they were created by God. Those who listen to God's knowledge in the end enters heaven and become deities. They are none but ourselves. So first we will be worshipping God Shiva, who is indeed Shiva, God. Then we start worshipping deities. Then we start even worshipping humans, nature, everything. And we believe the religious founders' words to be the words of God. So you have to give up everything. You have to go back to worship that one God based on Quran. But in reality, we are not going to worship him because we did not know the relationship between God and ourselves till God reveals that to us in the end. He says, I am your father. You are my children. And by children, God means the soul.
Mm.
This body is not his children. Only the soul is his children. So we need to, that's the reason God asks us to consider ourselves to be souls and to remember God as a point of light as lovingly as our beloved Father. Because He is. He is the true Father. He is the unlimited Father. No matter how many births you take, He is still your Father. But the physical Father that we are born to, they are our fathers as long as we are in this body. Once we leave this body, we have no connection with them. But with God, always He is our Father. So now, after knowing that He is Father and He is giving us the inheritance of heaven, we need to constantly remember Him and His inheritance. That is all God wants us to do to make us pure. So, as much as we spend time in remembrance of God, our souls will be filled with power that doesn't get distracted by the external surroundings and attraction. So that's the power of purity that we receive only from God. He is ever pure. So only God has this knowledge and He has to come to this earth to give this knowledge to make us into the divine being. That's the reason praise is only for Allah and not for any religious forms. Because religions were in fact created by humans. Human dictates are called the dictates of Satan. Satan is no one separately. So these five vices, lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego, they are collectively called Satan by Muslim and Christians, Maya by Hindus.
Mm.
So it is within us. God teaches us the way to destroy those vices by being in remembrance of God. So now it's not the question of worship, it's the question of remembrance. People worship when they do not know about anything. Hindus worship several gods without even knowing who they were. Christians worship Jesus without knowing anything about Jesus. Because what has mentioned in Bible, Quran, Gita, Mahabharata, Ramayana, they did not happen for real. They were just stories written by humans. Of course, God's knowledge is sprinkled. It's not full of God's knowledge, but God's knowledge is also there to a lesser extent. So God says, now, instead of searching for the diamond in a dustbin. Why can't you take diamond that God gives us? That's his direct knowledge. So that's what we need to hold on to. That's what we need to follow. So that's God's knowledge. But in Quran, it's mentioned their forefathers, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, everybody was worshipping that one God, Allah or Shiv. And to him, they, they surrendered. But there's no question of surrendering in devotion. In devotion, we basically do it to get wealth, to get child, to get spouse. It's about all about begging God to give this one, that one. There's no question of surrender there. It is only in the end we surrender ourselves. We don't consider anything to be ours. We are constantly in remembrance of God, so that the moment we leave the body, the final thought will be of God. So we don't take rebirth here. We don't wander here as ghost. Instead, we'll go straight to God, because that's our final thought. Whatever we think when we leave the body, there the soul goes, because the soul is the fastest and the tiniest rocket
Mm.
that can, no scientific rocket can even think of competing with this soul. Because if somebody is dying in India now, the very second the soul leaves that body, in that very second, it will enter the womb of a mother in America or Africa. There's not even a fraction of second difference between them. Then think how speed it is. So that's why God says, always be in remembrance of God, so that you don't get deceived at the end. So that's the reason Quran says only one God, which is true. But so what? There is only one God, so what? What should we do now? Because nobody knows how God looks like. Only when God says, He says, I'm like a tiny star in the golden red colored
Mm.
light world. You are like a tiny star in between the eyebrows. Consider yourself to be the soul and remember me. So that's what we need to do. And it repeats in the next verse also. Read it, sister. 134.
That was a community that has passed. For them is what they have earned, and for you is what you have earned, and you will not be questioned about what they used to do.
Okay. So they are speaking about the forefathers. We can think of the residents of heaven, because they were the forefathers for us. Actually, we were them. Because Islam and Christians do not have the knowledge of rebirth, they think they were forefathers. So only if you were in heaven, you will be able to understand this knowledge. Or else you will be satisfied with your own religion and you can't even think beyond that. Only those who were the residents of heaven in the beginning will be attracted to the direct knowledge of God now. So they take birth in the beginning, and they didn't actually worship God, but here they mentioned as if they worship God. But they in the end receive God's knowledge and be in remembrance of God and conquer these five vices, especially lust. So that is what you also have to do for the last 100 years. So 88 years has already passed. So many would have taken this knowledge and left their body. But whatever effort they put, they'll be receiving the fruit of that. And whatever effort you put, you will be receiving the effort, fruit of that. So only you need to make your own effort to enter heaven. That's nothing but to stay in remembrance of God as much as possible and to become soul conscious, that no trace of body consciousness is left. So, and you will not be questioned about their effort. You will be questioned about your effort, which means so God gives this knowledge through Brahma. Those who receive this knowledge are called Brahma Kumars and Kumaris, which means sons and daughters of Brahma. That is sons and daughters of Adam. So obviously it's a family. God is our father. We are all brothers and sisters. So it's a very big family. And we are at the end of this world without any power in this soul. So it is by remembering God we slowly increase the power of the soul. Till then, we will have so many weaknesses that makes us not to get along with each other. Some make one Brahmakumari may cause trouble to another Brahmakumari. He may provoke him. So you may get angry. God says, if he provokes, he will be questioned. That's his account. But you got angry. That's your account. You will be punished for that. You can't say, he provoked, that's why I got angry. It's a separate account. I will ask them. But for you, I ask you separately. Why did you get angry? Obviously, you will have several reasons, but God is teaching you. God says this is hell, the kingdom of Satan. Obviously, he has more power, but you are holding on to the hands of God, the ever powerful, the Lord Almighty. Even after receiving his teaching, if you fall for the vices, then it is your fault. You will be punished hundredfold compared to those who doesn't take this knowledge, because they are unaware of this. They will still be punished, but will be punished hundredfold, because we know about this, because we are going to heaven. In heaven, nobody knows what lust is, what anger, attachment, ego is. So even childbirth happens due to the power of thought. So that being the case, and that's your destination, so you should follow that path that's being followed in heaven. Even after knowing that, if you behave like the old world people, that is the Kali Yugi people, then you will be punished heavily for that. So that's the actual meaning of this particular verse, sister. It's amazing. It's really amazing.